Welcome back to the MSU Deer Labs online seminar series. It is brought to you by the Mississippi State University Extension Service as well as the MSU Forest and Wildlife Research Center. I will be your presenter today. My name is Bronson Strickland, and I want to acknowledge my colleague and the co-director of the MSU Deer Lab, Steve Damaris. As the name implies, this presentation is all about cool season food plots. Want to review everything more or less that we've learned over the past 10 or 15 years. Want to go over the most common forages, their nutrient profiles, which plants work well, which ones work well in mixes, and which ones deer are attracted to. When we're finished with the presentation, my goal is that you are going to feel completely equipped to know what to plant on your property and why. By no means is this every possible thing you could write about or talk about with cool season food plots, but I think it's a really good collection, certainly for people starting out to get you going. For experienced food plotters, this goes without saying, but if you're new at this, seedbed preparation is time well spent. We want to ensure that most all of your seeds are going to have really good seed soil contact. The more you can maximize that, the greater your chances of having most of your seed germinate and survive. So spending a little bit more time to have a good seed bed is a really good investment. And I have a few slides here just to demonstrate this concept. And what we have here side by side, this is wheat. So the species of plant is the same, but two different techniques or planting methods. On the left-hand side, you will see where the wheat was drilled. On the right-hand side, we used a drop seeder. Not a seeder that's going to broadcast, but rather it's dropping it straight on the ground. And you can already see, because of what I said on the previous slide, good seed to soil contact, even though these were planted at the same time. You can see that the seed that was drilled, great contact with the soil, immediate germination, had good moisture, had rainfall that followed, and you see the growing conditions initially were so much better for the drilled seed versus the seed that was dropped. And this is just a little closer view. The seed that was dropped, you can see that it is also germinating, but at this point it does not look like it is germinating at the same rate. And if we zoom in a little closer, you kind of see the difference. On the left, you'll see some wheat. There's also some clover there. You will see where the wheat is more or less all uniform in terms of the seeding depth, and it's responding so quickly, but that on the right, it's a variable. We had some places where the seed finally rested and it ended up being good contact with the soil and germination was more or less immediate. We have some other seed, as you can see, that is in the process of germinating, but because it's on top of the soil, it's taking more time. So just a good example there about what seed soil contact does and how quickly the seed can grow and respond when it has good contact. This is a good example using a drill, and when you have two different types of seed that you want to plant, doing initially passes for wheat and then staggering the location where it's drilled in between the wheat is also drilled crimson clover. And so you can see that both the wheat and the clover responding very, very well. Okay, I have a few slides here showing you over time the difference in the growth of the wheat using a drop seeder, which would be similar if it had been broadcast, versus being drilled. So you'll see the date here, the timestamp in the top right, October 30th, and notice we have a much more uniform stand with the wheat that was drilled on the left. Now let's fast forward a couple weeks and a little more rain, and notice that the area that was drop seeded Still not as uniform and hadn't completely caught up with the drilled seed, but is looking much better. So we can see right there at the beginning of the planting season, especially if it's going to be hunted, and the timing of when you want this crop to develop, that your planting technique can have a big impact. Now, deer season is over, we're into the springtime, and notice essentially those plots are very similar. We actually did weigh the biomass. I'll report on that later, looking at the two different techniques, but I would say for the most part, for somebody that's doing this for deer hunting and deer management, the yield probably at the end of the day is going to be very similar. And here we see that exact same plot in mid-April. Notice there's hardly any difference at all. The seed drill is a wonderful tool for the reasons we talked about earlier. The seed soil contact you control, survival is always going to be greater. You actually have to plant less seed when you drill. But for those that don't have access to a drill, and most of us don't be discouraged. As you can see on the right, it took a little bit longer to get that wheat up and get it growing, but I think it compensated and it caught up, and we have a beautiful plot there. So drill if you have a drill, but if you don't and you need to broadcast, use a drop seeder, that can be equally as effective. I think the key is when you're broadcasting is taking that extra time to create a good seed bed, and you can get similar results.